Betsy DeVos, that is Blackwater founder Eric Prince's sister. Blackwater, the murderous hit squad. They're like the SS was for Hitler. Blackwater was basically the same thing for George W. Bush and then for Donald Trump. But Eric Prince and Betsy DeVos are brother and sister, and Betsy DeVos was appointed in 2017 to be Secretary of Education in the Orange Vomits cabinet. And I believe the confirmation for the first time, she barely was confirmed for the first time in history. A nominee was put forward to be Secretary of Education and barely made it. And part of the reason is that Betsy DeVos defines fascistic Christianity. She and her whole family, she comes from the family that has to do with what's the pyramid scheme? Oh, I can't think of it right now. The home products that it'll come to me. But the whole family are Christian nutcases, and they have heavily endowed Hillsdale College in Hillsdale, Michigan, which is a fascist Christian school of the highest order. And they turn out these types of graduates whose minds, when they enter Hillsdale College, they still have the ability to think a bit. When they emerge 4 years later, they have been completely brainwashed. They no longer are capable of independent thought. This is like the Moonies. Remember them? Reverend Sun Myung Moon's ardent followers. But anyway, that's where Betsy DeVos comes from. When she was secretary of, well, I'll get to her in a second. Let me tell you, I'll make this transition. It won't register at first, but Navient. Navient was one of the country's largest student loan servicing companies. And yesterday, it finally reached a deal with the government where it has agreed to $1.85 billion with 39 states to settle claims that Navient, had made predatory loans that saddled students, young kids, with crushing debts that they were unable to pay. And since they were unable to pay it, their credit ratings were destroyed. And I might add, a vast majority of these students were people of color. The deal announced yesterday, according to the New York Times, requires Navient to cancel $1.7 billion in delinquent private student loan debts for nearly 66,000 borrowers, and then pay $95 million in restitution, I guess, to the states. The loans were crucial to Navient's ability to make a large volume of lucrative federal loans. Navient was the servicer of the loans. The money came from the government, not from Navient. According to prosecutors, quote, Navient repeatedly and deliberately put profits ahead of its borrowers. It engaged in deceptive and abusive practices, targeted students who it knew would struggle to pay loans back, and placed an unfair burden on people trying to improve their lives through education, end quote. That's according to the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, one of several states that had sued Navient. That's from the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro. Now, most of those who took out the loans that would be forgiven under the settlement attended these fucking phony for-profit schools like the ITT Technical Institute. Do you remember back around 2009, 2010, after the economy crashed, thanks to George W. Bush, all of a sudden, it seemed like daytime television was flooded with these adverts for so-called technical institutes, technical schools, all sorts of things you could learn to do, like how to code insurance claims from doctor's offices, or how to take somebody's temperature. Do you remember that bullshit? And you could do this Very simply, it wouldn't cost you a dime. All you had to do is sign up for the loan. Of course, the loan would run roughly $35,000 a year, which at the time was on a par with Harvard. But these loans were targeted toward young people, not students, young people who didn't know what the fuck to do. Their parents couldn't afford to send them to school. They may have just lost their home. It was difficult finding a job other than slinging hash someplace. So all of a sudden, their morning television is interrupted by these commercials that promise everything. Just call this 800 number. We have admissions supervisors waiting to chat with you. You dirty bastards. At some schools, Navient anticipated that more than 90% of the loans would default. They knew it before they authorized the loans that came from the Department of Education, run by the Christian Nazi Betsy DeVos. But what it lost on the private loans was outweighed by what it gained on the federal loans guaranteed by the government that students at those schools took out. Oh, it was the perfect scam because there was no downside for the scammers. Which brings me around to Betsy DeVos. Now, NBC had a piece about her about a year ago, and it starts this way. Even in a government full of people without the integrity, will, or courage to do the right thing, most of the agencies stand down, or at least pretend to, when ordered by the courts. But not the Department of Education under Betsy DeVos, who seems to have been only further animated by her losses in court over her efforts to deny the rightful debt cancellations owed to people who attended predatory for-profit colleges, borrowers who are disproportionately women and people of color, and often now working in frontline jobs. This was during the pandemic, of course. First, the piece went on, DeVos tried to delay an Obama-era update to borrow defense to repayment rules. It's a 1990s era regulation that says if a school violates state law, borrowers are entitled to cancellation of their federal student loans. The Obama administration's update included new protections like forbidding schools from preventing students from suing in class action lawsuits. A judge found DeVos's delay to this rule unlawful and arbitrary and capricious, end quote. DeVos also failed to cancel the debts of tens of thousands of borrowers that the government already deemed entitled to the relief. Another lawsuit challenged this failure, and the courts ordered DeVos to halt debt collection for any borrower covered by the lawsuit. That was 16,000 students and parents who were then collected from anyway. So DeVos was held in contempt of court, and the education department was fined $100,000. Even though the department was doing what this Christian Nazi ordered it to do. And then in a stunning display of fascist Christian lawlessness, the education department under Betsy DeVos then found yet another 17,000 borrowers it had illegally collected on after the ruling. The Justice Department found more. But the Christian Nazi Betsy DeVos's legal troubles didn't stop there. Oh no, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey had previously applied to the Education Department on behalf of 7,200 former students of Corinthian colleges in the state of Massachusetts. And the Attorney General there said their debts were unlawful and therefore uncollectible. In 2018, a court found Betsy DeVos had illegally seized the tax refund of two Massachusetts students or their parents, given that they had open applications for debt cancellation. But DeVos kept on illegally seizing other Massachusetts borrowers' tax refunds even after the court ruled against her, which led to another lawsuit. But you see, this is the thing. Christian fascists will tell the courts, go fuck yourself. We don't operate under civilian or secular law. We are agents of dear God and the Lord Jesus fucking Christ. So get away from me. I don't follow your rules. And in June of 2020, the same judge who found DeVos' actions illegal in 2018 ordered her to cancel the debts of all 7,200 former Corinthian college students in Massachusetts. Now, a string of legal defeats like this, you would think, might give a department head like Betsy DeVos pause. Instead, as the Times or NBC reported back then, it's been full speed ahead for the Christian Nazi Betsy DeVos. She rewrote the borrower defense regulations so dramatically that almost no borrower will ever qualify for debt cancellation again. The Education Department, under this bitch's reign, itself estimated that only about 3 cents of every dollar borrowed will be forgiven under the DeVos rule. And her rewrite was so drastic that 10 Republican senators joined the Democrats to vote to overturn her rewrite in March of 2021. And to overturn Trump's veto, or I should say Trump's veto, kept Betsy DeVos's rewrite in place, even though the Congress said, no, you can't fucking do this. So when this article was written in July of 2020, a particularly cruel and Orwellian sleight of hand was being tried, and that is denying debt cancellations without admitting they're doing so. Yeah, well, here you go. If this is not fascist Christianity, it doesn't exist. Under Betsy DeVos, the department would write off, or they would write to tens of thousands of defrauded borrowers that their claims had been approved, but because there's no evidence they were harmed, the amount of debt relief is zero. So yeah, you win, but you're not getting shit. Nothing. Keep paying. Now, all of that was to be expected because the first thing Betsy DeVos did when Trump made her the Secretary of Education was to stack her department with former executives of the very for-profit colleges who are now fucking these students. The head of the Education Department, who made it very clear before she was made head of the Education Department that she wanted to see an end to this filthy goddamn secular education, these government schools. You know, the ones that were funded by tax dollars to some extent. And she wanted them replaced with the kind of curriculum that was available at Hillsdale College in South Central Michigan. Christian fascism, or more plainly stated, fascistic Christianity. That's what our Miss Betsy DeVos wanted. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com. And never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.